For more on this, let's bring in our week-ending strategy session with political commentator Jerry Nichols, coming to us from downtown Toronto. In Regina, we have Sally Hauser, a senior consultant with Navigator, and with me in studio, Marianne Carter from Earnscliffe Strategy Group. Hello to all of you.
Hello.
So, pot and uniform. So let me start with you, Jerry Nichols. We're just a few weeks away. The military has a plan. But you know what? They seem to be in a minority. Police forces, airline pilots, no guidelines yet. So, Jerry, let me ask you this. Is Canada ready for, recreational pot?
Well, it seems the military is ready for it. And I guess that shouldn't surprise us. I mean, no one is ever going to confuse the military with the age of Aquarius, if you know what I mean. The military is a very straight-laced, very conservative institution. So their rules on marijuana use are also very straight-laced and very conservative. I mean, that's, to me, makes sense. I think nobody wants to think about guys driving submarines under the influence of marijuana. So that makes sense, and I think the military is sort of, being proactive in this, and they're out in front on it. And I think it's also part of a much wider public relations campaign by the Liberal government. I think they're doing what they can to kind of reassure all those Canadians out there who might be getting antsy about this policy. And the Liberals are basically saying, hey, we're not a bunch of wild-eyed hippies. Look what we're doing. And we're taking really severe precautions with this. Look at what we're doing in the military. And I think we're probably going to see more kind of announcements like this as we get closer and closer to the marijuana date.
Well, it seems that we're getting pretty close anyway. But Sally, the legalizing recreational marijuana is a game changer. It's one of Justin Trudeau's big promises. I'm wondering, did this government think this through? Because police forces don't seem to be ready, cities aren't ready, provinces we're asking for delays. Has the government thought this through?
I think they have. And I know the provinces and lots of people have been saying, it's too quick, not enough time. But the fact of the matter is that we've been on the kind of collision course, if that's the right word for it, for legalization for a long time. It has been over a year now. You're always going to have ancillary issues that are coming up. But it's almost like you have to rip the Band-Aid off and now just kind of deal with it. What I find interesting with the announcement today from the military, which all the regulations, which I find totally reasonable, is it's starting to make people think about how this is going to work in terms of labor, not just in terms of straight legality, in terms of retail, in terms of licensed producers. How kind of bosses, employers are going to deal with this issue now that it's legal. In addition to the military, police forces, pilots, things like that, I think about, friends of mine when I'm home in Newfoundland who are working up in Alberta out in the oil patch and whatnot, and you can't have anything in your system for 3 weeks. You could justify that by saying, well, it's illegal, so we can fire you if you're found to have marijuana in your system, but now it's legal. And so, if they can't show that you're smoking marijuana on the job, what's going to happen there? So I think there's going to be some, interesting legal challenges on the labor side to this when we see the legalization come on October 17th.
So, I'm wondering, Marianne, if the government should have done this sort of gradually, sort of start by decriminalizing marijuana, maybe get us used to it, or is this the right way to do it? Just go all the way right away?
I think they've taken the right approach, and they did delay by a number of months. It will become legal in October. But I think we have to remember when it comes to the military and jobs that are in the context of public safety, whether it's within engineering or the police force, there are already rules and regulations in place, regardless of if it's legal or not. Same with alcohol. So there will still continue to be mandatory testing and these types of measures in place. The question is how does this intermix with the cross-jurisdictional rules and regulations and where you work and how, if you're found with it's in your system and it's verboten, what are the necessary precautions going forward? So I think those still some unanswered questions on that front.
I want to ask the three of you, so how about amnesty for pot smokers? Because there are 500,000 Canadians who have a record for pot smoking in this country. I heard that as a statistic. Let's start with you, Jerry. Should there be amnesty right away
I think, Sally's point, quicker is better. And I think, sort of get all these questions out of the way. I think amnesty would be a good move. I think it would be probably more popular even than legalizing pot itself. So I think this is something that the government should do. And yeah, I think they should do it quickly.
Sally?
Yeah.
Amnesty right away?
Absolutely right away. I would have liked to have already seen talk about this or more talk about it than we've seen. What I always find frustrating is where you still have people, still up till now, getting criminal records for being charged with simple possession, let alone dealing. But those people tend to be the poor, First Nations, immigrants, marginalized people in society who are still being busted and convicted and having criminal records that ruin their lives. Well, you've got the Toronto Star writing articles about, middle-class white women doing yoga on marijuana, right? The cognitive disconnect in the justice system and the legal system thus far has been too wide, and I think it would be quite damaging to not have an amnesty going forward.
Look, I take a different view on this, and it's my black letter law perspective, and it's still not legal yet. So regardless of, your social policy perspective on this, the law is the law. And if you're going to use that in this context, there's a whole other multitude of other issues where are we going to grant folks amnesty in error of something? It's been crystal clear that it is still illegal.
So, there's another issue our Power Player producers brought up, foreign fighters who returned to Canada. So the Canadian Global Affairs Institute released a study this week saying Canada should charge them with crimes against humanity and war crimes and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. So the question is, and I want to go around and have your views on this. So should we rehabilitate, as Justin Trudeau suggests, or should we prosecute these people to the fullest extent of the law? Jerry, let's start with you.
Well, I don't know which is the best policy, but I do know what's the best politics. And the best politics on this issue is to say, prosecute these guys, put them in jail, revoke their citizenship, don't let them into the country. Because I think the average person out there doesn't like ISIS, doesn't like terrorists, doesn't want them in Canada. And I think this exposes, and I think the study exposes, the weak link in the Liberal battle line, because their perception out there is that Justin Trudeau is weak on terrorism. And this study kind of calls that out, kind of highlights that. So if I'm the Conservatives, I look at the study and I say, you know what, this is ammunition. I'm going to use this against the Liberals. And if I'm in the Conservative room, I say, you know what, this is a fundraising letter, right? You use this as a hook and say, Justin, look at this group. This is a respected, nonpartisan group, and they say Justin Trudeau's weak on terrorism. Send us money so we can fight for Canadian security. So I think this is a really good issue for the Conservatives to kind of pounce on, and it's an issue that will put the Liberals on the defensive.
Sally?
I'm going to agree with Jerry on this one, the differences between policy and politics on this. Joyce, you said at the outset, prosecute to the full extent of the law. The problem we have right now is if we're looking at that legal system and what is possible and what is available, actually getting prosecutions is extraordinarily difficult. We have very, very little foreign intelligence as a country in Canada that, would allow a prosecution that would actually stick. There's a difference between intelligence and evidence that is going to stand up in a court. And so political side, absolutely, string them up is the only language they understand, and that kind of rhetoric is what I expect to see out of the Conservative Party. But in terms of practice, what actually happens, there's only so many tools available. I think, they'll want to be looking at peace bonds, the possibility when people return. But, something that the Liberals can do going forward, because presumably this is an issue that we'll have to deal with, going forward. You've got a country, Australia has what's called a neutrality law that says, essentially going away in and of itself, going away to fight in a militia in a foreign war for in and of itself is a crime, and then you can be prosecuted for that. So the burden of proof is very, very different. What we can do here right now in terms of the reintegration, you got to think that, you know, even if you are able to get a conviction, people are not going to be in jail like ad infinitum. They're going to get out eventually, and then you will still have to be looking at rehabilitation. What needs to be looked at is like a multi-jurisdictional, you know.
Another dilemma for the Liberal government. That's unfortunately all the time we have. So thanks so much to the three of you for being here, as usual.